Hi, Peril. Do you know what's in your water?
Welcome back to this episode of Health IQ Podcast by the Quay County Health Council. Today we will be looking at a topic that is starting to get more coverage in the news, PFAS. Our guest today is our new contractor with the Quay County Health Council. She works with a grant that's focusing on safe drinking water for all. Hello,
Hi.
Sadie Rush. Our crew is Joyce Runyon and Bobby Hockaday, and I am Brenda Bishop. Welcome, Sadie. We're glad you were able to come today. And you've only been with the council just a couple of months, so I thought we would start by introducing yourself to our audience that comes on a regular basis. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Sadie Rush. I'm from right here in eastern New Mexico. I grew up around Melrose, and I've come from a farm and ranch family. And water was actually a really big topic in my environment growing up because my dad was a well driller. So I'm really excited to be here on the podcast and talk about this topic.
So last summer, I attended a short training where the speaker gave an overview of what PFAS were. And I was suddenly reminded of some things that had been in our local news the past few years. And I felt we sort of needed to get this message out as what PFAS are. I know that you've been doing some research into this to get some Facebook posts and things ready. And so I thought you could tell us maybe just a little bit about what PFAS are.
Yeah, sure. So PFAS is a short term for polyfluoroalkyl. It's a man-made chemical that was developed back in World War II towards the end of the war. It was used on war equipment such as tanks and stuff because it was such a great chemical to repel water. And so it was used throughout the war, and then they started marketing it for home use. And that's where we start seeing the use of Teflon pans, and it's huge in carpets. It still is. Clothing as well, and even toothpaste.
Yeah, on my training, they said something about it's a substance that doesn't mix with water at all, so it it doesn't dissolve.
Yeah, no, it doesn't dissolve.
So it's waterproofing type things.
Yeah. Actually, the only way to get PFAS out of our water is through what's called reverse osmosis. So yeah, it's a really difficult chemical to get out of our water once it's put into our water system. And there's so much of it in our environment that it's almost impossible to get rid of it.
So you said there's so much in the environment, but if we didn't have those kinds of manufacturing here, do we still have a potential in our area for contamination?
Well, actually, there isn't any concern for contamination in our area. They've done water testing for private wells as well as public wells. And thankfully, right here in Tucumcari, there's no concern for PFAS in the water. However, if you go down the road to Clovis, they did have an extremely dangerous contamination that happened near the Air Force Base.
And that resulted in... wasn't a dairy producer having to?
They had actually the Air Force Base. It was a fire extinguisher substance that contained PFAS, and they dumped it into the water, and it did affect a dairy in eastern New Mexico. And he ended up having to get rid of all of his cattle because they were contaminated with it. So
it's very much an economic issue along with the health issue.
Yeah.
Did you research any of the health impacts of PFAS, or do they know that yet since it's relatively new?
Yeah, actually, research on this started back in the 50s when a farmer, he also lost a large crop of cattle, and it brought up a lawsuit because so many people were getting sick being exposed to this water contamination. People were having issues with respiratory disease, cancer, reproductive issues, developmental issues, and so on. There's just a list of different things that has come from exposure to PFAS.
And I sort of remember on that training, there's some that have shorter half-lives than others. The half-lives are how long it takes for the environment to break down. But then there's some PFAS that never break down.
Yeah, so there's actually 7 million different varieties of this man-made chemical. And actually, that lawsuit that I was talking about, that happened since then, and I believe that happened in 1953. I might be a little bit wrong on the date there, but so the half-life of these chemicals can vary because there's 7 million different varieties of it. And back when that lawsuit happened, they were only investigating about 20 of these different varieties. And so still to this day, it's unknown what the half-life of some of these varieties are.
Wow.
Yeah, and because we're exposed to these in our everyday life, they do believe that there may not even be possibility for a half-life because it's in our clothes, it's things that we ingest, it's in our houses, it's just everywhere.
And probably if it gets in our soil, it's in our produce that we eat and things
Yes.
like that as
Yeah.
well. Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing the science behind this and the exposure that we've experienced since this short amount of time.
So since this has been discovered now, are there rules that companies have to follow?
Yeah, so back in April of 2024, the EPA they enforced their first ever drinking water standard to protect communities from PFAS exposure. So basically, what they do is they come in and they test public wells. They don't necessarily test. They don't necessarily test private wells. But how they do that is they use their test, they test the water, and for an example, one variety of PFAS, they're allowed to have 4.0 parts per trillion. And so this is different for all the different varieties of this chemical, but that's how they test for it in water.
So that's in the public drinking water. So those systems, they'll have to invest in some reverse osmosis equipment.
Yes, yeah, and people will notice that in their water bill. If your community is affected by PFAS, the EPA cracks down on them basically and tells them you're going to have to, these are the guidelines. You guys are going to have to record this, monitor this, inform the public about the hazards of this. And then in order to take care of it, they're going to have to use reverse osmosis to get it out of the water. And of course, the public are going to end up paying for that in the end.
Oh, of course. And then the companies, I'm sure they put rules on them that they can't add more to our drinking water, or can they still be continuing to contaminate?
As long as it's within the standards of the EPA, unfortunately, PFAS are still going to be released into our water to some extent.
At just a lesser extent.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So many of our people have septic systems, they have wells.
Mm-hmm.
What can they do to ensure that their water doesn't have too much of the PFAS in it? Because I can see, we all share aquifers throughout, and water comes downstream. So if somebody above us,
Right. Yeah, so like I was saying, the EPA does not regulate private wells like they do public wells. However, they do, at one point, they were given grant money, and so they were able to come out and test several private wells in New Mexico, and thankfully the majority of those wells did not test for PFAS. But if you do have concerns about your own private well, you can go to the EPA website and you can actually order your own testing kit to do that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Are they expensive?
I imagine they probably are. But another thing to look into is the EPA is usually they find grant money to be able to cover those kind of costs. So if you just get on their website and check it out, I bet you could find something to get your private well tested.
So I remember some of my husband's relatives live in the southern part of the state, which has a lot of things in their water that doesn't taste as well as good as our water up here.
Right.
And so they've put reverse osmosis things on their lines in their house.
Oh, wow.
To clean out the dissolved solids, I think they're called.
Right.
Will those home units help for our people here if they were to put that on their well?
I think it would depend on what kind of grade that you got, but I do think that as long as the label said that they would be capable of filtering out PFAS, that would be a great option for people to look into.
I just got a new refrigerator that has a water filter for the door thing, and it has a whole list of chemicals that the filter
That's amazing.
filters out. It's sort of surprising. I don't know if any of them are PFAS. I was just like, there's like 20 of them.
Yeah, 20 different chemicals in our water. But it's amazing, like I said, the 7 million varieties of PFAS that could be out there, and many of them have never even been tested or the effects that they could have on people. So I think it's just a matter of limiting our exposure to it, having your private wells, and maybe keeping up with your public communities, water records, and just being aware of what you could possibly being affected by.
Right. And at a different training, I did learn that public water records are public, and you can request those, but they also have to be posted on the city's website.
Yes.
Or your village's website, so you can access those to see what's in your water that you're drinking from your tap if you're on a public water system.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great option to keep up with, for sure.
So as we move forward and we learn more about this, are there some places that people can look for more information if they are concerned about PFAS?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we just talked about, your public water system usually has a website that you can get onto. They have lots of great information there. Again, the EPA is a really great website where they monitor so many different areas, not just in our state, but all over the United States. And so you can become more educated on possibilities of exposure, just like what happened in Clovis.
And I think there's even some organizations like drinking water organizations or something that may have information too. And I noticed when I got on and looked at our water report, they even had links where you could get information on all the standards that they were talking about within the water. So
Yeah, and I think keeping up with the standards on those websites is important because those standards can change fairly regularly, and it can be really difficult to keep up with that if you're not just constantly thinking about exposure to PFAS or other chemicals. So, maybe keep that tab open on your internet and check it every once in a while if that's a concern for your community.
But I know there's a lot of concern around, I can remember hear stories from is it North Dakota?
Yeah.
More recently was at West Virginia. I don't remember what states, but that have been in the news about water quality, and it could be this PFAS thing that's in their issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
So did you have anything else you wanted to share with us about PFAS that I might not have thought to ask?
I think the most important thing that we can do is just keep ourselves informed, check up on the websites regularly, keep up with your local news, and just communicate with your friends and family about the importance of water health and quality.
Oh, I remember there was some other thing, and we could look that up and add it as a little thing at the end of our podcast. But there's a website where you could go to pick things to purchase that were not created by making PFAS.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah.
I'll have to find that. It was like if you wanted to buy waterproof clothes that didn't have PFAS and stuff. So those kinds of places. But we could definitely add that to in our blog. I'll put it in the blog so you guys can find that link. And some other links, we'll put it in the blog.
Yeah, that would be great.
Be good.
Yeah.
So we like to wrap up our podcast with the reflections on a quote. And one of these quotes that I had picked out, you said was, very special to you, so we're going to pick that. It's Water is the Driving Force of All Nature by Leonardo da Vinci.
I love that quote. I think it's so great. Like I had mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I grew up in a household where my dad was a well driller here in the community, and water was just such a hot topic in our house, especially being farmers and ranchers, because I'm sure many people know our area is coming to a place where water is a concern. And I just think that's really cool to think about the importance of water and what it takes to make life thrive here. And it'd be nothing without water.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've been going through drought for I don't know how many years now, 15, 20. It seems like we'll have a good year, but it never gets us out. And as I look around, recently we were up closer to your part of the county, so dry and brown, and then here as well. I haven't had grass for years in my yard. So. So it's, I think it's true if we can't have food to eat if we don't have water to grow the grass, to feed the animals,
it really is
to grow our vegetables.
The most important ingredient to life, truly.
And trees. We have to have trees, and if we don't have water, we don't have trees, and trees are so important to keeping our climate cooler. So
yeah, absolutely, especially here in New Mexico where it's so hot.
Sadie, thank you for coming today to record on this very important topic, and we have a little gift for you since it's your first time with us.
Thank you.
One of our special mugs, and I'm just so glad we had this chance to talk about this, what some people call a scary topic, but I think it's important that we need to know about that. And thank you all for listening. We'll be sure to come back next time and hear whatever interesting topic we have.
Special thanks to hosts Brenda Bishop, Quay County Health Council Coordinator, and Sadie Rush, Quay County Health Council Climate and Health Coordinator. Podcast crew, Director Robert F. Hockaday. Producers Robert F. Hockaday and Joyce Runyon. Camera operator Robert F. Hockaday. Second Assistant Operator, Joyce Runyon. Editor, Joyce Runyon. Music provided by David Morris. Funding for Health IQ provided by a New Mexico Better Together grant. Brought to you by the Quay County Health Council. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at Quay County Health. If you have any content ideas, reach out to us by email, healthikpodcast@gmail.com. More info about this topic and more available on our Health IQ blog, QCHEALTHCO.UNCIL.org.
This podcast was created solely for educational and entertainment purposes. It is not intended as a substitute for advice from a healthcare or mental health professional.